Hello everyone, I'm Wave, and somehow I've gone 6 months since the last Muv Luv review, so I figured finally about time that I go ahead and leave my thoughts on Muv Luv Alternative, which is one of the highest rated visual novels of all time, and is something that a lot of people here is like a must read. And today I hope to set out my thoughts as to how to best read Muv Luv Alternative if you are interested in experiencing it, and hopefully kind of doing justice as to explaining my reasoning as to why I think Muv Luv Alternative is a really enjoyable experience to read. So let's get into it. Now, Muv Luv Alternative kind of has this weird history of being split within the Muv Luv Trilogy. Muv Luv Alternative is the third and final part of that trilogy. What's weird is that Alternative can be experienced as a standalone because of the fact that the first two titles in that trilogy are within one application, and then Alternative is its own game application. So you could technically buy Alternative and just play that without experiencing the two prior titles. I do think you can do that and in some way get a little bit of enjoyment, but I think to better get a grasp on the story and feel more impacted on its story beats, reading the two prior titles, being Extra and Unlimited, is very much necessary. At least I believe so. Kind of goes along with maybe just rushing to read Alternative. If you read Extra, there is 5 different character routes that you can read, which is just rom-com slice of life. So I know that there's a solid amount of people that don't really vibe with that genre. It's only necessary to read 2 of the routes out of those 5 in order to progress into the second title, being Unlimited. I think reading all 5 is the best way to go about it. It depends. I mean, obviously I would say if you're somebody that doesn't like the rom-com of Muv Luv Extra, I almost want to say Alternative is something that you shouldn't even bother reading then, because I feel like so much of the impact is weighted on I guess just by the time you get to Alternative, if you are aware of how Alternative is structured, the story having to do with war ties heavily back to the earlier entries and kind of making it to where you have something to fight for by the time that you are in Alternative. By going ahead and just taking your time and experiencing the slice of life moments within Extra, Alternative feels more impactful because of the fact that you have something on the line and you're trying to protect those that are dear to you as the player. Now, actually talking about Muv Luv Alternative itself, one issue that people bring up when it comes to Muv Luv Alternative is that it goes too heavy on lore dumps. And what I mean by that is that everything in Muv Luv feels very meticulous. If you look on Steam, they actually do sell art books with dedicated data that is more expansive and kind of goes into bigger detail when it comes to all the different character designs and stuff, and the mechs. And I think Muv Luv Alternative, people like to say that there is too much info dumping when it comes to understanding the enemy that is presented throughout its story, and defining all the various weaknesses and strengths when it comes to each individual enemy class, to where some people just want to read it in, like I was saying earlier, almost kind of just rush through it as a rite of passage, I guess, as far as oh, I've read Muv Luv Alternative, which was one of the highest rated visual novels, out of necessity rather than for overall enjoyment. I think one, actually, we could talk about it later, I almost feel like there wasn't enough lore dumping, but also I think the way that Muv Luv Alternative kind of structures itself and has this very heavy amount of attention to detail when it comes to all the various factors, whether the gear or the enemies, really does actually build the world more. And in the case of the enemies too, it helps to provide this level of tension whenever you go out to battle, because you know the strengths and the weaknesses, and it feels like instead of having them be some sort of like trash mob that you're just mowing down, every single encounter feels a little bit more dangerous because you've already set up that like prior knowledge. Now, another thing I could say as far as like world setting and overall like attention to detail is that within Muv Luv Alternative, the scope of the story seems quite broad and almost feels like it encompasses too like wide of a scope, but at the same time I actually found it to be quite like focused. What I mean by that is you have a very broad worldwide war setting where you're able to see all like the various factions and how they conflict over one another, being able to see all of like the various motivations for each dedicated faction, and being able to see that like one group is the good guy. It's kind of like this moral gray of like being able to see that everyone has their own certain thing that they're fighting for. So like the general scope of Muv Luv Alternative feels quite broad, but at the same time, when it comes to you're obviously seeing the story through one of these factions, it feels quite like grounded because of how like the setting is. When you're not going out to battle, you're like experiencing the story within the barracks and having it feel like every single time that there is like some other group come into the barracks makes it feel like this is like a special occasion, but at the same time all the people that are normally there with you in the barracks feels like very homely, and at the same time makes it to where you're able to like build up the bonds with the people that you're regularly seeing, so that way there is a level of tension when you go out to battle and not knowing who's still going to be around to come back with you at the end of the day. Now when it comes to the barracks as well, because it is a more like focused area, I like that despite it being a war setting, that you have this place to where you can kind of harken back to those vibes of Muv Luv Extra and have the very like kind of silly, goofy moments with other people in your like squad or just on base. But then also the characters are able to realize the situation and being able to shift and become serious when it's necessary. So I think also just like within Muv Luv Alternative, the characters feel quite well-rounded. You're able to see like multiple different sides of people, and overall I just think the writing in Muv Luv Alternative is quite good. When we talk about the main character as well, the character that the player are seeing the story through starts out as this sort of like slacker, I guess, and is kind of just like the overall like the class clown or goofball, and over time through the various story beats, moving from Muv Luv Extra into Unlimited and then finally into Alternative, you get to see just like an overall shift in mentality to where things become serious. And I feel like as the reader you get to become like quite attached to the character that you are seeing Muv Luv's story unfold through, because of the fact that you get to see what is like maybe somebody that is not really too likable become somebody that has bettered themselves, and overall you just kind of start to root for the main character and getting to see how they like approach various different things that happen throughout the story. Now also when it comes to Muv Luv Alternative story, while I will say that a lot of the narrative feels quite well fleshed out, I also think that it starts to kind of dip in quality once you get into the last maybe the last 8 to 6 hours of the game. It's kind of like a sharp shift in tone to where the story just feels really well fleshed out when it comes to all of the various lore drops and stuff. But then all of a sudden it almost feels like it's a little too rushed. You get a set goal in mind that's going to lead you all the way to the finale of Muv Luv Alternative. And it almost feels like it's kind of like this training montage in a way, to where you're used to living out every single day in the barracks, and all of a sudden we're kind of like running right past that and getting closer to that goal and pushing aside some characters that you've maybe grown fond of, and it almost feels like they start to not have as much importance as you get to the story's conclusion. It's kind of weird to describe, but that was something that I felt was a bit of a letdown when it comes to Muv Luv Alternative, but overall I think it doesn't really hamper the experience. By the end of it, it's just decent amount of characters that almost feel like they're introduced a little too late into the story, and it starts to like overshadow other characters to where maybe you wish that there was a little bit more time to go ahead and spend with everyone as a whole. But yeah, those have been my thoughts on Muv Luv Alternative. It's been quite some time since I read it, so hopefully I did the game justice in just describing how I see it and how I feel like it is something that is well worth your time to read, but also that I think it is worth investing like the max amount of time when it comes to Muv Luv as a whole. I don't necessarily think it is a great idea to go ahead and just kind of skim through and just kind of just be like, oh, I'm just going to go straight to alternative, or, oh, you know, I don't really like the rom-commy portions of Extra, so I want to spend as little time in the world of Extra as possible. I think it's something that if you want to read alternative, you kind of have to be prepared to sit down and experience it. Muv Luv Trilogy as a whole, I think took me like between Muv Luv Extra and Unlimited, those two titles took me around like 30 hours, and then Muv Luv Alternative I think was closer to like 28 hours in total. So add it all up, it's probably around like 60-hour experience to read all of the original Muv Luv Trilogy. But I think that is like a pretty solid investment of your time, and overall I really enjoyed Muv Luv, and I do think that if you are willing to kind of experience something that's a little different, I want to say it's something worth looking into and experiencing yourself as well. So yes, I've been Wave, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.